This class is about the permission to be human, the permission to accept yourself for who you are, with all the good and with all the bad. Tao is going to explore our ability to change and accept our faults from a psychological perspective. And I'm going to speak about our strengths and how we can develop them from a Jewish perspective.
Allow me to start with a sweeping statement, which is somewhat of an overgeneralization, but a generalization that is important for understanding psychology as a field of study. The intellectual history of the world, in essence, can be looked upon as a conflict between those who believe that human nature is immutable, that it cannot be changed, that it is a given, and those who believe that human nature can be improved, can be changed. What are the ramifications of belonging to one of the two camps? In his excellent book, A Conflict of Visions, Thomas Sowell shows how having a different understanding of human nature leads to inevitable conflict. Those who hold the constrained vision of human nature believe that our nature is immutable, that it cannot be changed, believe that there are flaws in our nature that are inevitable. The recommendation of those who hold the constrained vision is first and foremost to accept our nature, accept our limitations, constraints, and flaws, and then work with it. Those on the other side of the continuum who adhere to the unconstrained vision of our nature believe that we can change our nature, that we can improve it, that we can find solutions in order to perfect our imperfect nature. So do we work with our nature or do we work against it? What I'm going to argue for is that for a healthy psychology, for a happier life, we need to fall on the constrained vision extreme of the continuum. Our nature is fixed. If we want to lead happier lives, if we want to lead fulfilling rather than frustrating lives, we need to accept our nature and then work with it.
Tao is looking at one side of the permission to be human, accepting and channeling our weaknesses. But I want to address the flip side of the coin in Judaism's approach to self-growth, channeling our strengths, focusing on what is right about people. For the past 7 years, I've taught and mentored college students and young professionals, and I found that most people don't have this kind of strengths-based approach at all. Gallup Press found that 77% of Americans, when they receive a child's report card, focus on the worst grade over the best grade. Because people's natural tendency is to see the negative, the things that are going wrong. If we miss the bus or fail an exam, it doesn't matter how many other buses we make on time or how many other exams we ace. We remember that one bus or that one exam that went badly. And it's usually easier to point out problems than it is to know your strengths. In Jewish belief, the fundamental step of human growth is awareness of our strengths. Know what you're working with. And positive psychology has demonstrated the many benefits of using our natural strengths, including greater life satisfaction, self-esteem, physical, emotional, and spiritual health, overall well-being, and a higher sense of achievement and accomplishment.
The topic I want to turn to now is the permission to be human. It clearly illustrates the consequences of holding the constrained versus unconstrained vision of human nature.
I first thought about the idea of the permission to be human the first year when I taught positive psychology. And I remember going for lunch one day and being a shy introvert, I found a nice corner in the large dining hall. So I was very happy when I saw a student, Matt, coming over to my table and saying, "Tal, can I join you for lunch?" I said, "Sure." So he brings his tray and sits down, and then he said, "Tal, I hear you're teaching a class on happiness." And I said, "Yeah, that's right, positive psychology." And he said, "You know, my roommates are taking your class." There were 2 of the 6, so I had to be nice to him. And then suddenly he says to me, "But you know, Tal, now that you're teaching this class, you've got to be careful." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "Because if I see you unhappy, I'll tell them." And I actually used that the next day in class when I was facing my students, all 6 of them. And I said to them, you know, the last thing in the world that I want you to think or believe is that I experience a constant high, or that you, by the end of the semester or year, will experience a constant high. There are two kinds of people who do not experience painful emotions, such as disappointment, sadness, anxiety, envy, hatred, anger. There are two kinds of people who don't experience these painful emotions. The first kind are the psychopaths. The second kind are dead, exactly. So if you experience painful emotions, it's actually a good sign. It means that you're not a psychopath and you're alive. Good place to start. We can build on that. We can work with that. The problem, though, is that in our culture today, we immediately think, oh, there must be something wrong with me because I'm experiencing anger, or what is wrong with me? I'm anxious. When in fact, there is something wrong with us when we do not, at times, experience these emotions. Imagine this. Imagine waking up every morning and saying to yourself, I refuse to accept the law of gravity. I've had it with the law of gravity. It's so cumbersome and so ungraceful, you know, to walk down the stairs and up the stairs. It would be so much nicer, you must admit, to just float to work in the morning. Imagine if you really did not accept the law of gravity. Well, for one, you may not survive for long, especially if you live on the second floor or higher. But even if you do survive, you'd lead a life of constant frustration. When instead, not only do we accept the law of gravity, we may not like it, but we accept it, we also create games around it. Not so with painful emotions. And we ignore the fact that painful emotions are part of human nature as much as the law of gravity is part of physical nature. We accept the former and reject the latter, and we pay a price for it. In the words of Francis Bacon, nature to be commanded must be obeyed. So if I create a flying machine, I need to obey nature. I need to take into consideration the law of gravity, the law of thermodynamics. If I discard the law of gravity, if I ignore the laws of thermodynamics, then I will not be able to create a flying machine. It will crash. The consequences are similar for our lives, for the psychological realm. Nature to be commanded must be obeyed. I need to obey my nature, and that means that yes, at times, I also experience painful emotions. And yes, at times, I'm also open to pleasurable, joyful emotions. Because people think, oh, positive psychology, yeah, that's positive thinking, right? That's smiling all the time. No, it's not. It's about leading a full, fulfilling, and real life. And in real life, there is also pain. In real life, there is unhappiness. In real life, there is anxiety and sadness and anger. And in real life, there is joy and satisfaction and happiness and love. That's also real life.
When I began counseling, many people came to me with problems that stemmed from the fact that they weren't utilizing their strengths properly, or they weren't utilizing their natural strengths at all. And they weren't even usually aware of the fact. Why? What causes this? Well, the first clue is that we don't start off that way. Children definitely don't have this problem. They live fully with their own strengths and don't doubt their capabilities. So what happens between childhood and grown-uphood that causes this change to happen? There are three major reasons why people don't live their life according to their strengths. The first is people just don't know. Number two, there are pressures of society. Society has a definition of what it means to be great, what it means to achieve. And it's hard to get past that sometimes. And number three, people have false expectations.
Sometimes you expect things that can't possibly happen.
My mother can tell me as much as she wants, honey, you can be anything. I got no chance in the NBA against Shaquille O'Neal. What I want to focus on right now is really reason number two, the pressures of society, which is a huge problem. As we get older, our perspective of our strengths and ability to succeed is increasingly influenced by the opinions of society and the surrounding world. If our strengths aren't valued, we may push them away and try to develop other strengths, but we won't be as fulfilled by that path. In Proverbs, King Solomon described the essence of Jewish education, Chanoch lenar al pi darko, Raise a child according to their way. The focus needs to be on what works for that child and their natural strengths. Expectations are a natural part of every relationship in society and can definitely be used positively. But King Solomon is pointing out that when expectations don't reflect our strengths and nature, they put us in the wrong path. They deter us from seeing and accepting who we really are in favor of who our parents, teachers, or friends want us to be. This happened to a friend of mine, Mo David from Toronto. Mo's the oldest in his family, and his parents had their hopes set on his becoming a doctor. His mom always joked they named him Mo David for the initials MD. Around 18, when Mo went to college, he told me that he began taking stock of who he really was. The person he was supposed to become, the white coat, the stethoscope, and a degree on the wall, wasn't really what he wanted to be. It was a bit of an early life crisis, and his parents were more than a little dismayed when he became a philosophy major in college. Mo really struggled with this decision, not least because he respected his parents. Mo had internalized the external messages he got from his parents, telling him what strengths were valuable and which weren't. And this happens to all of us. The principle applies to every adult, adolescent, and child, and really every human interaction they have. It applies to every relationship you'll experience throughout your life, personal and work-related. Expectations and systems are a part of the world, and we need to watch how they affect our self-image and our expectations for ourselves. We want to maximize our potential and be successful in life. And yes, we need to work hard, but each of us needs to do that in our own way.
What we need to experience, what we need to strive for when it comes to our emotions, and that applies to painful as well as pleasurable emotions, is unconditional acceptance.
You know, the best advice that I got after our first child, David, was born was from our pediatrician. David was born at 1 a.m. and at around 7 a.m. the pediatrician came to our room to check up on Tommy, to check up on David. For some reason, he didn't check up on me. They were doing great. And then he left the room, but before he shut the door, he said one more thing. He said, over the next few months, you are going to be experiencing every single kind of emotion to the extreme. You're going to be experiencing extreme joy and ecstasy, and you're going to experience confusion and anxiety. Every single kind of experience to the extreme. And then he said, it's fine, it's natural, we all go through it. So after about a month, I started to feel some envy toward David. Why did I experience envy? Because for the first time since Tommy and I had been together, and we've been together for many years, since the age of 14, for the first time, here was someone who was getting more attention than I was, no matter how much I cried. And then, 5 minutes later, I would experience this most intense love toward David. Now, normally, I would have said to myself, what a hypocrite. But because I had the doctor's voice in the back of my mind saying, it's natural, it's fine, we all go through it, essentially giving me the permission to be human, I could experience the envy when I didn't like it, but I experienced it, allowed it to flow through me, and then was free to also fully experience the love that I felt and feel toward my wonderful son. You see, in effect, there is a paradox at play here. What's the paradox? The paradox is when I try to suppress, repress, avoid painful emotions, they only intensify, they strengthen. Let's do a quick experiment. Again, I'm a psychologist, I like experiments. I'm not going to apologize for it. This is an easy one, very simple. For the next 10 seconds, do not think of a pink elephant. Do not think of a pink elephant. And I'm sure no one thought of a pink elephant, except for me seeing pink elephants flying all around. Now, what happened? When we try to suppress a natural phenomenon, such as seeing the image of a word that we utter, that phenomenon intensifies. And the same with painful emotions that are natural. When I try to suppress them, they intensify. You know, one of the biggest challenges that I had to face when I decided that my calling in life was to be a teacher was that to teach means to stand in front of an audience. And that's a real challenge for a shy introvert. And I would go before a lecture when I was nervous and I said to myself, Tal, don't be nervous. Tal, don't be anxious. No anxiety, no nervousness today. And what happened? Pink elephants all around. Just intensified. Whereas after reading people like Daniel Wagner on ironic processing or Viktor Frankl on paradoxical intentions, I realized anxiety is natural. Some people have it more than others, but it's natural. And I let it flow through me rather than fight it. And now, before every lecture, I still get nervous. Before every lecture, including this one. But now I give myself the permission to be human, to experience the anxiety and nervousness, and then it goes away after as little as 9 hours, which is why we're staying here till midnight. No, but now it's manageable. It's already excitement as opposed to a debilitating form of nervousness and anxiety. Let me tell you another story about David. When David was 2.5, something new came to the family. Her name was Shirel. So after about a month, David comes to me one day and with his huge eyes looks at me and his little smile says, Abba, Daddy, can we throw Shirel into the garbage? It got worse, because about 2 months later, he would come to me and he would say to me, Abba, I hate Shirel. Now, my inclination was to say to him, no, David, you don't hate her. You love Shirel. What message am I sending my kid? No, there's no permission to experience hatred. You must experience love. No hatred, no hatred, no hatred. Pink elephants, instead of the permission to be human.